first of all, thanks to Brand Innovators and MediaMonks for putting on this awesome event and inviting Jami and I to be a part of it. I'm just sorry we're not able to be there in person. We will get to meet in person one day, Jami. So just very quickly, and I'm just going to hand the mic over to Jami. I'm, as Nora said, SVP of Growth here at MediaMonks, and have the pleasure of working with lots of global brands to help them on their digital content journey, Under Armour included. Jami, as you know, MediaMonks and myself, we've been working with several Under Armour teams that you touch over the past 3 years or so, creating content series across various digital and social touch points. And also, as I said, it's been so insightful getting to know you this week and understanding more about your background, drive and ambition. So on that note, would love to find out a little bit more about you. I know you've been at Under Armour for, goodness, nearly 13 years now.
It's been a long time.
And love to find out a little bit more about your journey, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, and Liz, you told me, which is a mistake, that you did track and field before. So I feel like you should go on that track and totally show those guys up. You would totally be fine.
As long as it's 200 meters, just short distances.
Fine. It's totally fine. No, thank you so much. And Liz, like you said, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you more. And today has been really amazing, just seeing all the panelists and just hearing their backgrounds and everybody coming from all angles. But yeah, so like Liz said, I've been there for just about 13 years at Under Armour. I started there literally 10 days out of college. I came from sport. I grew up in sports. I played 4 different sports growing up. And it's just a part of who I am. It's just the way I was raised. And so as I was approaching graduation, I couldn't imagine anywhere else besides being in sport. And I did my internship with the Baltimore Ravens. And at that time, Under Armour was teeny tiny still. And I was actually playing field hockey at Salisbury University. So we were familiar with Under Armour because of the Cold Gear mock with the logo, and that was basically it. But however, when I started my internship, every time I went to Baltimore for the games to work, I kept seeing the office of Under Armour. And I was like, this is such a cool place to be at. It's about sports, it's apparel. And it's funny because as I grew up, I was such a Nike fan and slowly fell in love with Under Armour and just understanding the culture and who Kevin Plank was, who was their founder of the company, and just this team sport mentality. So as I was approaching graduation, I applied and started in customer service. So just understanding, you got to start somewhere, and worked my way through events. And really at that time, we were so tiny. I mean, campus at the time was maybe 500 people, and now we're campus almost 3,000 people. So just seeing the growth of the company overall, but also just your day-to-day, it's crazy. So at that time for events, we really didn't work with agencies at the time. We did everything ourselves. So my job at the time was to really build the grassroots strategy for all of our male team sports, and then build into a little bit of the women's side as well, but just because women's was such a new category for us. And then I made the move over to social media marketing. Same thing, very new. This is 2012 to 13, team of like 3 people. Also new. And I realized that I really missed people and the interaction with people versus just being on screen. So I actually made the move over to sports marketing at the time. And when I made that move, it was a job for men's and women's training, and then also running. And running for Under Armour just got started. It was 2014. We had 1 running shoe. We were totally new to the category. And to be very honest, we actually were in the category probably about 4 or 5 years previous to that, but we totally pulled out because the shoes that we made were just not a good fit. The mentality into running wasn't there. So I really endured the wellness and training space. So I was like, okay, I can learn about running. I played sports. I ran all the time. So, needless did I know that there's a whole track and field side that, within that sport and category. Then there's road running, there's trail running, and everything from pro athletes to events and learning into that category. So as we were growing in the run community and into the business, it was getting too big where we had one athlete to growing to a roster now of almost 30. It's really come a long way for almost 6 years, and I'm really proud to see where it's come out and the ways that we've really hit into the market. So that was kind of my journey along. I had 9 different lives, which is typical Under Armour. And I think that was the cool part too, that, there was many times I kind of created my own role, and it was so new for the company. And it's just been a really great journey of just seeing how the company has grown from very small to a big corporate company and very North America based to globally. It's been an amazing experience.
And I think also to keep you interested and to keep reinventing these roles and kind of, you being able to innovate yourself and your role within the company as it's growing, like that's testament to a great company, right? Not just that you're there for 13 years, but that you're continuing to grow, continuing to challenge, and can bring that wealth of experience with you. That's it's super cool and pretty unique. And so it's interesting you were chatting about, starting off with one shoe. It's so interesting that now look where you've got. And now I was going to ask you about the Map My Run app and the tech integration and stuff. And I feel like that's a good time to ask that, because it's like, Under Armour, when you started, had one shoe. And I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about that and where Under Armour are with tech integration and how the shoes play into that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I would say, so we had the one shoe, and then at that same year, we bought Map My Run, MyFitnessPal, Endomondo was the whole platform. So what we did was really start to take those insights from the Map My Run community and what is needed. And so what we did was actually by 2018, we placed a chip in the shoe for all of our shoes. We came out with this hover platform. It was more of about a cushioning platform. However, every shoe had the chip in it that automatically would sync up to Map My Run. And at the time, there really wasn't anything like that. What we were doing is untethering. So you can actually go out for a run in your Under Armour shoes, and when it would automatically, you don't leave your phone at home, it would automatically upload all your information to your Map My Run app when you came back from your run. So that was really the first of its kind in the industry, and it's evolved so much even just in the past 2 to 3 years, where now you can actually do coaching capabilities for your cadence, your stride. There's training platforms in it. So now even seeing of our day-to-day marketing capabilities, we know what shoe is probably most popular within the market, within the Under Armour line. We know what their favorite distance is. We know their favorite training distance as well, what type of workouts they're doing. So just to think the evolution of just starting with one shoe, and our approach that what first shoe came with was like, we all talked about innovation. And so the way that we have just evolved each year to get better, and also just to think about the market, what we saw with the hover platform, yes, every footwear brand had a cushioning platform, but how were we really helping runners? And that's where the Map My Run capability really came in, to really figure out other points that we can continue to make them better versus just a cushioning platform, but also what our competitors were not offering. And this is something we felt like we had at our advantage.
And I think also with Map My Run and times of COVID and lockdown, it's like that's enabling people to start kind of, even if they're out running on their own because of social distancing, it's allowing them to be able to communicate, compete, drive themselves further with their friends and their colleagues, right? In a way that has existed for a while, but I think there's been, I would love to hear a little bit more about kind of how you think that focus has changed and the advantage of that, especially in lockdown or as we start to come out of it.
It's everything. Yeah. Or we're still in it. One or the other, some places, depends where you live. So I feel like what we offer through the platform is that, it's this community really. And then you touched on it, Liz, it's about, feeling this competitiveness where probably people used to get that in the gym or in classes, boutique fitness. So that's the other part of my job, is overseeing the training business, and just seeing the evolution of training and fitness has completely changed everything. But I think what apps like Map My Run has offered is really allowing people to even get started. So you're seeing, I remember probably the first 2 months of COVID and being outside, I'm like, where did all these runners come from? Like, First of all, there's too many people running. You're in my way, and it's
I need to get out of the house.
I know. And it's just like, it was so cool to see all these new runners come out of the woodwork, because you just never see it. In Baltimore, where I live, I mean, it's definitely a running city. People run along the water and in different parks here, but like, it was totally new faces, which was so exciting. And of course, my mind looks at their shoes. So like doing a shoe count. But I also think what I love about a lot of the app capabilities is that you find a community, you're able to see when your friends are working out. It actually will ping you when your friends are working out. So you get these alerts. And when you're like sitting there like, oh, okay, Liz is working out, I need to get out, and I need to move my butt now. So, there's just different ways to really motivate others. I where people used to run in groups and feel that collectiveness, you kind of lost that in-person interaction, or even in your gym or studio. So this is a great way to really allow that to happen, through the app. And like I said, the coaching capabilities has been another thing for new runners. When I talked about these new runners, I'm like, please go to Map My Run. And we've actually seen a huge uptick of subscriptions to go up for the app for new runners. So that's been really, really exciting to see. And also our challenges. So I think, with virtual races, and I'm sure we'll tap into this later, but it just kind of the fatigue of it. So how can you mix it up? And I feel like challenges really do that, to just you have a different range of dates, just not a one and done deal. So people are able to just keep that competitive going and really connect with one another.
And I think also when you're talking about kind of keeping that momentum of that competitive spirit going, it's like, normally, I know you run half marathons and marathons and things, and you have, which I honestly, I kudos to you. I can run about 7K is about my maximum. I'd rather do it on the do it on the back of a horse, and I don't have to work out so much. But yeah, when we're talking about keeping that motivation going, when you don't have those marathons, those 10Ks, whatever you're working towards, it's like ways in which you can keep motivated, gamify it, et cetera, and that kind of then segueing into the biggest sporting event of them all, right? The 2020 Olympics, and how that has shifted out. And like, would be fascinating to hear more about, because I know we chatted about it a little bit as well, like the effect that has had mentally on a lot of the athletes that you guys have been working with, and how you as people, regardless of the fact that you work for Under Armour, have been able to support them in this crazy time when they've worked their whole lives to perform and compete at such an event, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about this before, and actually Mary Kate, your previous panelist from the Boston Marathon, she brought this up of just like, immediately you check on the athletes, because, these athletes train their whole lives for this moment. And, I think about an athlete that we have, Natasha Hastings, where she is a new mom, and, this was going to be her last Olympics. And it's like, now she has to wait for another whole year. And it's just, there's never been anything like it. So it's something you just don't even think about can potentially happen. But yeah, I would say the first thing for us, and what my team's mindset is, it's all about the athletes. That's our team. That's our family. Like I said, we have a good group of almost 30 athletes right now. And so immediately what we did, as states were shutting down, and I think the tough part that I think for Olympics and the team is that when other states were shutting down and some weren't, athletes automatically think, oh God, that athlete's gonna have a competitive advantage of me. They're working out, I can't with my group. And so that started to happen. And then you could just see the stress on their faces and just the anxiety around it, of just the unknowingness. Is Olympics going to happen? And I think once Olympics called the ball of like, okay, we're moving it, you could just tell the stress went down majorly. But now it's like, okay, now I'm going to train for a whole nother year. And there's so many other factors of, if they're having a good year training this year, if injuries come up, it's all these factors. So what my team and I did is just really get everybody on a call. We immediately started setting up weekly calls. Our brand is very much about human performance. We have a human performance team that works directly with our athletes, and they cover anything from sleep to recovery, training, mindset, breath work. And we actually right before COVID, which is like insane this happened, we actually had a summit based out of our Portland office, and that's where our human performance team is headquartered. And we went through all these things right before we, were quarantined. So luckily they had all these tools, and that was the biggest thing. We want to be there for them. We want to be a brand that can provide all these tools for them. So we started doing these weekly calls, and then having our human performance team join in to kind of revisit a lot of the tidbits that they covered when we had the summit, but also just to create this platform of how athletes were feeling, and they were able to talk to other UA athletes on the roster. And it was just so powerful of just the way that people opened up and having that open line of communication and just, having that dialogue, because I think because they are pro athletes, everybody's like, oh, they're pro athletes. They can handle anything. But when it comes to this, and something I mentioned to you was like the Michael Phelps movie that just came out.
Yeah.
It's just understanding the back end of the stress and anxiety and the pressure of the games, and something like COVID that happened. It definitely put some work to them, but I'm so proud of like having the resources and tools for our team to be able to offer that to our athletes. And that's what you have to do. You got to be there for the athletes. That's our partnership. That's our relationships. That's our brand ambassadors. And so if we're not there for them, how can they be there for us? And that was really important for us. And we've continued those discussions with them. We cut back a little bit because they are back with their teams a little bit more. They're back in the gym, but they know we're a line of connect with them anytime, any shape, way, or form.
Just amazing as well. Such bizarre timing that you happen to have that 2-day immersion right at the end of February. Like really crazy time.
Yeah, we remember we were like seeing COVID happen. We were in Portland, and I think it just had its first case. We're like, we're fine, like everything's good. And here we are. It was like a month later, and we were like, what?
Yeah.
So it all worked out.
Oh my God. Yeah. And amazing that you guys are supporting the athletes in that way. And I guess going from huge, great big athletes, famous athletes that you work with, right down to kind of grassroots influencers and running crews. Like, can you tell me more about how you tapped into those niche groups and your present day approach to influencers a bit?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, when I started getting into the run category, just really doing a deeper dive. And I think that's one of the things is just like really immersing myself in there. I was looking around at different companies, and what I realized is that they invested all their marketing efforts into pro athletes, which is great. Or there were these running groups that seemed like they were in some of their imagery, but not really like leverage as tier 1 athletes. So as I was going through Instagram, I keep seeing these groups that were dressing alike, running together, like 200 people, and just the energy of them. I mean, they ran hard, they party hard. But the fact about them is that people didn't think they were real runners because they were like everyday people, or they weren't former track and field collegiate athletes. And what I loved about them is that they knew they were there, they were supposed to be there, and they were bringing a whole different aspect of running to the community that actually made run feel really cool. They brought music, and there's just different collective vibe. And what I loved most about it is like each of these groups were bringing something different to community. So when I started researching more, I realized brands weren't really signing them, or creating a partnership. So my approach when I started talking to these, I'm like, what do you want? What's important to you? And why would you want to work with the brand with Under Armour? And they were excited to see a new brand come to the table that wanted their insights, wanted to do wear testing to give us to be better for our footwear, our products, ways that we can help them within their communities and really give them a voice to tell their story. I think of a couple of them. District Running Collective is a big one for us, that, the impact that they create for the African-American community in DC and what they do through running and creating a voice through that. They easily have 200 members running through the streets of DC and just really creating impact for the community. So as I approached this to my director at the time, I'm like, I really feel like these are everyday stories that people can relate to. For myself, I come from a wellness background, so I always related to the instructor at the front of the room. I couldn't relate to the marathon runner because that's all they did was run and train. And, for me, I'm like, I'm working my 9-to-5 job. Like, how do you train for a marathon at the same time? So I found these running crews and their leaders to really be influencers in their backyards, to really influence people to move their bodies, to use running as a platform, and people come on, from different backgrounds and real life stories. So I felt like they were an important aspect to bring running in the community alive versus just pro athletes. And pro athletes obviously are very important. They drive, our team to be authentic in this space for sure. But I just felt like there was a whole nother world of running that hasn't been told. And we've actually combined the worlds a little bit through some certain of our events where we've actually had our run crews talking to our pro athletes and like just mushing running together, and just like it just makes the community and the industry so much better. So there's been some struggles where they, some people felt like, oh, well, running crews are not real runners. And what I loved is that when we came into the running space, people were like, Under Armour's not a real run brand. They're a football brand. And so I feel like we kind of were on that same playing field together, and that why we needed to show up into the run industry.
And I love that, yeah, you called it like the everyday athlete, which I think is such a great thing. And being able to be that link, right, between the everyday athlete and the big sports stars is really amazing to help drive them. Even when they may not ever meet these people, it's like they can relate to them in a whole different way, right?
Totally, yeah.
And so obviously this is this whole event is based on women in sports marketing, and I know that you've called the industry a bit of an old boys club. So what's the most impactful piece of advice that you've ever received as a woman, and what would you tell other women who want to pursue a career like yours?
So I would say one of my mentors just said that to trust yourself because you are the expert in the room. She was a former boss of mine, and it's still dear to my heart. I think as women, and I think somebody else touched on this, we kind of second guess ourselves of like why we're there and why we're at the table, and especially, in the industry of sports. And when I tapped into the run industry, and like I said, Mary Kay and I have a lot of the same facts where the majority was men, agents and race directors. And I didn't come from a run background. So I just like the insecurity show through, like, am I supposed to be here? Like, why am I doing this? And, you're at the place at the right time. So just trust that. And like I said, my former boss used to tell me, like, you're the expert in the room, trust that and just own it. And the other thing is too, is just like, I've had such incredible women in my life through Under Armour that have been mentors of mine. I'm still we're like on a text every day, checking in with each other, especially times like this. It's so important. And I just feel really fortunate of just having those women who have just been mentors and friends of mine to help me every step of the way.
Yeah, and I think it's like, I don't know, like the level of communication that you have with people. It's sometimes you know them so well. Other women, it's like just a look or a nudge or the way that you say something. It's like, yeah, I can relate with exactly how you're feeling right now.
Yeah, I think that's more than ever right now. I think about my early days of Under Armour, and it was very competitive. And I think this is for the industry in a whole, where women have had felt like they had to compete with each other to be at the table, and versus like, hey, let's pal up together and let's help each other out. And so we're on the same page so we can actually help dominate the room or get our point across the board. Yeah. And I think that's just evolved and changed, thank God, because who wants to be in that place, right? Like, just to live that way. And even right now during the pandemic, it's like women are going through so much more at home. They're the caretakers, they're, homeschooling, they're doing work, they're working all hours. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about how women are more affected during the pandemic than men. And I think that's something too, like, you need to lean on your women, you need to lean on your girl pals and your mentors more than ever right now to help with mental sanity. And just to, like, when you're by yourself every day and versus an office, you're so used to just that everyday conversation and check-in, where you're home and you're, maybe if you don't have kids, and like for myself, I'm like, am I doing all right? Like, am I still doing the right things? Are we on the same page? Like, you feel this loneliness, and I'm such a outgoing person. I need that human connection. So I feel very fortunate of the people that's around me, but I think more than ever, women during this pandemic and these times, like, they need to support each other more than ever.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny, like, I grew up being a real kind of like, I was a real tomboy and like always really enjoyed kind of guys' company just as friends. And it's weird. It's like now I am seeking out much more female company just because it's like just the relatable thing, how like sensitive and delicate I am around some things and then really bullish around others. And I don't know, like, yeah, I'm learning to be more of a girl's girl, I think.
It's weird. It like evolves. I was the same way. I was such a tomboy growing up, and now it's completely evolved. And you know, I'm so grateful for where I am right now and the people I surround myself with.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. One more question, and then we'll go through to some really great questions which the audience are asking. But just with regards to your personal passion for wellness and like the way in which your personal drive kind of feeds into the work that you're doing, like it would be lovely if you could just touch on like how you lean into that everyday athlete to drive your inspiration.
Well, I think right now it's the only way I feel like I can keep centered and grounded. You know, like I said, I grew up as an athlete, and I'm a very hyperactive person, so movement is so important for me. And I think in a world of sports and in the industry that we're in, it's very intense. It's very competitive. And I feel like times, you know, it can really bog you down. And so what I've really learned, you know, in these past 10 to 13 years is just really like what makes me feel good. And so leaning into the wellness side, if it's meditation or even just going for a run, and just having that movement just really, really allows me to just feel centered and focused and, you know, what makes me feel good. And so when I'm talking to an athlete or we're talking to a trainer, just understanding that it's actually, I used to think it would hurt me because I teach like spin classes on the side at a local studio here. And I used to think it would hurt me where people are like, is Jami doing her work because she's teaching classes on the side? But like, it's actually really helped me in my everyday work because I'm able to drive insights from my experiences to bring them to the table at work or to talk about the consumer because that's what I'm seeing in the room, or just seeing the latest and greatest in the wellness space, that it helps us to be a little bit more innovative and thinking about the latest trends. So it's actually helped me where now it's become more about my personal brand of who I am. And I'm obsessed with the wellness scene, like anything that's new. And I'm like, I want to learn more. I think breath work and meditation is like probably the most important thing right now in the business or in the world right now, just to keep you centered and grounded and just mentally just grounded.
Yes, because the stylist doesn't show an update as if she's in transit or has she arrived.
Is that?
I don't know if somebody else is on.
Oh.
Somebody has pirated our line. But no, that's so true. And it's like, it's the feeling, whatever exercise you're doing, right? It's the feeling. Yeah. That's what I love, is the feeling that you get after you've exercised, right? Or after you've meditated or after you've done your breath work or something. It's that feeling afterwards of like stillness and feeling really centered, that it's like, that's what keeps me kind of driven to want to do more of it as well.
Totally. Yeah. It just, when you have those time, and I know when I don't do my routine or do my workout,
sure,
my confidence is down. I feel, you know, not to say my energy is down. And especially right now, it really helps me keep to that routine to keep me sane. So it's just something that I really hope everybody else is doing those things to make you feel good in your routine. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we have a few questions for the last 10 minutes from the audience, who I can't see, but I'm sure you're all lovely. So first question, if you could give your younger self a piece of career advice.
Just go to American Airlines Port and then we'll be there.
I'm just also I'm wondering who else is on the line.
And we have a surprise guest.
Oh, joy of tech issues.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's good to hear.
I'm not sure who that is, but yeah, I guess we just
go
regardless.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, of course I can. So if you could give your younger self a piece of career advice, what would it be?
Career advice. I would say just trusting yourself. I remember looking back of just like how many times where I just second guessed myself so many times and unsure. So I would say just really trusting yourself in that regard of, you know, what feels good to you. and just going for it. I think there's times I look back and I just hesitated because I didn't feel like I was good enough for the part or for the job, or when I look around, other people have experience. So until you try, you don't know. And you may fail. And I think those failures, and actually, I didn't talk about this before. The first time I went for the sports marketing job, I didn't get it. And that was a year prior to where I got started. And I just remember that moment, I was devastated. I was like, this is it. I'm never going to do sports marketing. I have to figure something else out. And timing is everything. And so I learned a lot in that moment. But then when I interviewed they actually came to me about saying, this job opportunity, we knew you were interested in it. It just, timing is everything, and you just have to trust it. So just trusting yourself, going for things. If it doesn't work out, like it will all work out at the end, believe it or not. And I look back and I remember those moments where I was so devastated. I'm like, oh, it actually worked out for the best. So it's just funny how those things work.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most definitely. So next question. Do you think that teams and organizations that engage highly with philanthropic endeavors are more likely to be more inclusive?
Yes, I think so. But also it's about the actions. I do think that there's donations or the charitable give back. Money isn't everything. So if a company is just donating money, and I think we saw that with a lot of brands in this past 2 months, that there are people who will speak up and say, hey, just because we donate doesn't really mean that's what's happening internally. And so I think that's something that companies and teams need to think about in that regard of, it's just not about the money donations. It's about the actions. It's actually talking about the statistics within your company and what you're really doing and filling those spots and making sure that you do have a diverse and inclusive team and only from, not just from the bottom, but all the way to the top. Like every part of it is so important, and really recognizing it. And like I said, I just think we kind of have lived through it. It's still living through it. It's not done by any means. But I do think like corporate companies really need to wake up and realize that this generation of their workers are not going to be silent if something doesn't settle well, if they put a statement out there. It's really important to the employees that they're standing next to a brand that is really speaking their truth. And I think employees were really scared to speak out about that. And I think more than ever, I think now they realize like it's really important to what I align with my values, with the company I'm working with. So just something to think about in the future. It's just making sure you are checking all the boxes and just putting a statement or a donation out there.
And I think I totally agree. And these things take time, right? And throwing money at it is great, but it's trying to shortcut the solution. And it takes time over days, weeks, months, years to be able to everyone kind of throws around that word genuine and authentic. And it's like, it's one word, one thing saying it, it's another thing embodying it, right?
Yeah. And then we just went through that with Under Armour. We, as everything was happening these past few months, we realized that we cleaned it. We said, we haven't been perfect. And, I think a lot of employees and partnerships really wanted to see actions right away. And it takes time. You have to make sure everybody's aligned. We need to make sure that, same thing, you're not just putting statements, you're just not putting donations out there to say, this is what we're doing. You need to show the stats, you need to really put yourself out there. And it's really important to provide that. And like you said, it doesn't happen overnight. And it just takes time because you want to make sure you're getting it right. And I'm proud that our company, the statement they recently did, and it took time. It just takes time. And it's, you got to make sure you're doing it properly before you just hit press and put it out there.
Yeah, exactly. The next question actually relates to that. It's about brand purpose. So I'm going to skip it because it's basically what we were talking about. Okay. So moving on to the next one, how will influencers and social media platforms become part of your overall digital media mix? I mean, it's so embedded in everything that you do, right?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things for my world in particularly. We do look at influencers in that sense for training or run. When we look at platforms and agencies, we actually work with our consumer engagement team quite a bit because they work more on the social side and they know the day-to-day, where my team, we focus more on long-term partnerships. So when we think about pro athletes, even we sign influencers for long-term partnerships. We have a girl, Crystal Seaver, we kept using her. She kept coming up for agency work. And I'm like, why don't we just bring this girl on? She fits the mold of the brand. She is part of the Under Armour family already. Like, let's just build a long-term relationship with her. So my team in particularly works more on the long-term partnerships, which I would say, sometimes it comes from working with agencies and data platforms, but we do work very hand in hand with our consumer engagement team on the social side. And also it helps us to understand our earned media value on our athletes. So when we are signing athletes, it's just what it is today. Sometimes I'll talk to agents and they'll just tell me the athlete stats. I'm like, that's great. But I also need to make sure that they have, they have a personality, they have a brand, because at the end of the day, they're going to be an extension of our brand. So you take a look at all, what's their audience? Is it aligned with our audience that we're focusing on? Is it going to help us drive credibility in this space? So we look at all those things, but we mostly work with our internal team on that.
Yeah. And then, no, thank you for that. And then final question, as you've been, and this is from me, as you've been at Under Armour and seen so much change over the last 12, 13 years, and bearing in mind that this, the whole topic of this conversation and talk today, everyone's talks is about women in sports marketing. It's like, how have you seen the male-female bias shift over the 13 years that you've been at Under Armour?
Yeah, I would say, especially in categories that men don't really know much about, they definitely lean on us a little bit more of like, all right, you know the space more, so tell us. I've been really fortunate to work with my close team have been all women. So that's been really amazing to just my day-to-day. But I would say in Under Armour itself, that we've actually brought in some really great female leaders. You can tell that the team is really prioritizing that we're bringing these experts from the outside in to help lead the company. So just seeing that from the top and then seeing it trickle down is really important to make sure that we're seeing that. I would say also too, like our company is about 50-50 female versus male now. So, I mean, they really don't have a choice of like who's in the room and driving the expertise. So I think that's really important, as they're hiring and thinking about the experts in the room, and why having a female perspective is so important. And I, like I said, just having those folks in the room is so key.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's been, I think this is, we're at a time. Goodness me.
No.
I've been so chat with you.
No, we're not done.
I know. It's been so great to chat with you, Jami. Thank you so much for your drive and ambition and how that shows through, and answering our questions so eloquently and thoughtfully. Thank you. And Nora, back to you.
Thank you. I'm happy I'm not always having this kind of impact on people. They're like, oh no, it's time, we gotta go. I'm so fortunate to be able to ask you one more question, Jami, and let me know if it's a bit too much off topic. Might be, I don't want to throw you a curveball, but I'm thinking like, how much tech has played a part, like apps, etc., to kind of motivate people to run, the amateur runner. And if you see any future trends in that, or for that matter, anything else, any kind of content to motivate like the casual runner or amateur runner, or what we will call them.
Yeah, so I would say, I think it's evolving, activations more than anything. I think about our Met My Run app, and we touched on this earlier about challenges versus your virtual races where you do your 5K, you do your 10K, you get your bib, and that's it. I think we're hitting into almost a half a year now of COVID and virtual races that it's going to have to evolve. People are going to get burned out. They're already burning out. So I think it's just figuring out what they're motivated by, and, thinking about the amateur runner as well, like you mentioned, they're not going to go straight up to a half marathon or a 10K probably. Like, how can you double down a little bit more so they can hit achievements or a little bit more accessible to them, that they slowly progress and grow and lean in more to those, higher distances. So that's something we think about too, not even on the platforms, but just in general, like, how do we get people to want to lean into running? How do we talk to them? But I would say just activation alone of like even the day-to-day in person where you're used to talking to somebody about the shoe, trying on the shoe, where that whole experience is changing, evolving. So even now, thinking about the way that you do challenges, not just a race, and what keeps them motivated, it's community, it's support in that way, and from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is super interesting because that is also kind of tapping into what we've spoken about earlier today about like the digitalization going so much fast now because of COVID and creating kind of new habits and how that could also kind of affect that area.
Yeah, for sure.
Super interesting. It was so nice having you both, actually. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Jami.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on. And in our next Fireside Chat, I would actually